Geddes here with Daily Fantasy Winners. We've got the Genesis Open for this week's episode of Tee to Green. And so this is a tournament that is at Riviera Country Club. It is in Los Angeles. It is the last tournament of the West Coast swing before we head off to Florida for several events down there, starting with the Honda Classic next week. But so we've got a really good field here at Riviera, which is very much the norm here. Tiger Woods is making a return to Riviera for the first time in like over 10 years, I think, actually. And so, but we got a lot of good players surrounding him, obviously, as you can see on your screen, between Dustin Johnson, Jordan Spieth, Rory McIlroy, Justin Thomas, Paul Casey, Phil, and so on and so forth, Fleetwood, and all them. So we've got a really strong field. The mid-tier price players are really strong, and the bottom tier is even much stronger than last week's was. And so it's going to be a pretty good field. It's a tournament that not always comes right down to the wire, but very frequently it does. This isn't a huge birdie fest tournament. The first hole you'll see a ton of eagles on. The first hole's like 500 yards and it's downhill and it's a par 5. It's kind of tough to hit the fairway, but other than that, it's like a lot of these guys have wedges in their hands for their second shots on this par 5. So you get a lot of eagles on the first hole, but then after that, it's a lot of pars and not making and trying to avoid making bogeys and things like that. So maybe that's not the most appealing thing, but there are a few interesting holes here at Riviera that I'll point out here for you. I'll just show you one of them right now, actually. Hole number 6, it's a par 3. It's like, I don't know, I forget the exact distance. It's like just under 200 yards, I think. But it's kind of cool. It's the 6th hole, and I'll just pull up the picture right here. As you can see, there is a bunker in the middle of the green. Maybe you're familiar with this if you know Riviera or have watched this tournament before. You probably know this. But yeah, this is very unusual. You'll have a bunker here in the middle of the green. It's pretty awesome. And so once in a while, you'll get people obviously hitting in this bunker and have like a really awkward pitch to like, you know, because the pins, obviously, the green's huge, obviously, don't get me wrong, but it's not like there's that much distance here between the bunker and some of these pin locations, depending on where the slope is. So you get some really awkward pitches coming out of this bunker, but the ultimate favorite is when you get someone who really screws up, like, a shot, and they, you know, maybe there's like a front right pin over here, and they, you know, for whatever reason, they double cross a little bit, or they just pull it hard and de-loft a little bit, and they end up in the back left corner of the green, and they have to basically putt around the bunker and play the slopes to get the ball anywhere close to the hole. It can be pretty entertaining there sometimes, and you get some shots you normally wouldn't see. And so, anyway, so that's a pretty cool little hole. Number 6 is fun. Number 10's a very short par 4, and it's one of the best par 4s on tour. A lot of people think it is, or one of the best short par 4s at least. It's only like, it's just over 300 yards, but you can very easily make birdie. You can also very easily make double bogey, and there isn't even any water on the hole, which is pretty fascinating. I'm not even sure if there's really not much water, if any at all, on this golf course. It's very minimal if there is. So there aren't a ton of penalty strokes. It's just a matter of, you know, obviously, like, driving the golf ball well is good because these fairways aren't that wide. But the one thing that is interesting is usually driving the golf ball well here does reward you, meaning if you're a longer hitter and a straight hitter, or just, you know, both length and accuracy are good things here. But the one thing I've noted here in some of the reports is that because it's been extremely dry in California here over the last, you know, over the winter essentially, the rough here is not very long, and so it's a little bit, it's just not as penal as it's been in years past. So so driving accuracy, if it was like a little bit of a good thing there in past years, it does not matter as much maybe as it pertains to this year. Length is a little bit advantage. It's not a huge advantage here. It's a golf course that's a little above average in terms of length overall. In terms of difficulty, I'll show you here quickly. I'll pull it up here on the website, or PGA Tour Tournament History tab. Where is the Genesis? There's the Genesis Open. It's right here. So I think it's the 11th toughest course in relation to par at .493 strokes over par for the average round. And so, yeah, it's a tough course. It's right behind the Torrey Pines at the Farmers Insurance Open, and obviously that was a little bit of a tougher tournament as well. And so that's pretty much it here as far as a couple of little things I wanted to point out. Length is really only going to help you too much here, yeah, in terms of like some of the longer par 4s and things like that, but length doesn't really help you here in terms of eagles. The first hole is going to be a potential eagle hole for everybody, and then the couple par 5s on the back, you're going to get like a handful of eagles on each one throughout the tournament, and longer length does help there, but there just aren't that many of them to go around. So it's not like we're seeing you see like a dozen or more eagles on a specific hole or something where length really is the biggest difference. It's not really like that. So in any case, so length slight advantage, but not a huge one. So anyways, let's move on to the top players. So we've got Dustin Johnson, Jordan Spieth, Rory McIlroy, Justin Thompson, Paul Casey for our guys above $10,000 as or I guess what I'm using is kind of an arbitrary cutoff to talk about the top golfers. But so Dustin Johnson, obviously he is killing it. He didn't end up winning. Ted Potter played a really good round, and Dustin just a little bit off. Couldn't seem to make a putt throughout most of the day. Really, though, there's nothing statistically to not like about him. He continues to kill it. He regressed slightly in strokes gained approaching the green last week, but he's down to 55th. But again, is it 55th? Yeah, it's 55th. So that's nothing really to be concerned about. Again, we're dealing with very small samples here in the early part of the year. And we have to remember the strokes gained statistics are only factoring in courses that have shot length, which is almost all of them. But when you get to the tournaments with multiple courses used, like Pebble Beach was, and the Career Builder and Torrey Pines, you have some courses there that don't have shot length. So, like, for example, 25% of the Torrey Pines tournament, Torrey Pines North course was not used. The two of the courses at the Career Builder for like 36 of the holes, so 50% of the tournament, strokes gained was not factoring that in. And 50% of the rounds last week at Pebble Beach were not factored in for golfers that made the cut. So kind of keep that in mind. We're still dealing with really small samples here. But Dustin is killing it. The results show it. Statistically, he's great. He's putting really well this year, which is fascinating. 27th in strokes gained putting. He does continue to putt well. He regressed a little bit on that final round when he couldn't seem to make one, although his approaches were a little bit off that day too. But anyways, there's nothing to really hate against Dustin Johnson, I guess, maybe other than the ownership. He grabbed, I think it was just over 30% ownership last week at Pebble Beach. I would expect it's probably going to be about the same because we do have kind of these this top-heavy field. And as you see by the odds here on both DraftKings and FanDuel, he is just far and away above even Jordan Spieth and Rory and everything like that. And he's not that much more expensive. So yeah, everything suggests that Dustin's going to get ownership. He should be playing well here. As far as the tournament history goes here, where's Dustin's tournament history? Yeah, he's the defending champion. Of course he is. And then he also finished 4th in 2016, and he finished tied for 2nd in 2015 and 2nd in 2014. So yeah, Dustin's got pretty good history here, and he's definitely got especially really good recent history here as well to throw that in there. So ownership will be high. I think that's fine for the most expensive golfers. If you're new to watching some of my content, I think ownership in your GPPs is a much bigger deal when we're talking about the mid-tier price players and the cheaper price players. You don't want to play those guys in GPPs when those are the ones that are 20% owned. If you've got the most expensive guys, look, all of them have like a very good chance at winning, and so you do not want. My whole thing is don't fade somebody on high ownership that's the most expensive just because they're going to have high ownership. You should not like the golfer for some other reasons coming into the tournament, or maybe you're only making 1 or 2 GPP lineups and you're kind of torn between two guys and you just want to go with the lesser owned guy. Okay, that makes sense to me. But if you're making several GPP lineups, or you're just fading somebody, you're just fading somebody for the sake of high ownership at the most expensive spot, that's just you just want to include him in that kind of a spot. So hopefully that's clear. And so anyway, so Dustin, nothing against him for this week. Jordan Spieth still can't putt for whatever reason. This is pretty astonishing. And look, and again, it continues. The other statistics for Jordan Spieth this week were great. He did putt better. I think I just said punt. He did putt better at, I think it was Monterey Peninsula, which was Friday's round for him last week. He putted fantastically there. But the problem is the strokes gained statistics didn't factor that in. And so you did see Jordan play very well that day, and the putter came alive. But the putter let him down in the other 3 rounds. And Spieth's strokes gained putting 193rd. And that is going to change. It will regress positively. And so he is 11th in tee to green, 33rd off the tee, 24th approaching, 11th around the green. All the other stats check out. The form looks great. It's just the putter's letting him down right now. It's going to come around. I would continue to play Spieth. I think a lot of other people tend to agree with this just by basing it off of his ownership last week at Pebble. I was shocked that Spieth actually got as much as he did, given that he missed the cut at Phoenix. And I was shocked that Rory's was as low as it was given his price as well. Everybody just seemed to load up on DJ and then was just kind of mixed after that. That surprised me a little bit. I was particularly shocked at Rory. But since we do expect that Dustin will grab at least probably 30% of this ownership, just given where the other guys are at, because Spieth's putter's still letting him down. Rory missed the cut last week and everything like that, just in basing it off of last week. I have to think that Spieth, Rory, Thomas, and Casey, all their ownerships, nobody should really be above 20%. Maybe one of them gets up to like 21 or 22%. If anybody it's going to be, it's probably Rory. But just because we're seeing Dustin grab so much of the ownership, and somewhat rightfully so, at least in comparison to the odds, you should just not be worried about ownership for any of the guys between Spieth, McIlroy, Thomas, and Casey in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion. So for Spieth, though, I think he's great for this week just because the strokes gained putting, it's going to come around positively. Everything else looks great in his game. The only other negative thing I can just point out with Jordan Spieth right now, his history here at Riviera isn't exactly great, especially when you compare it to the other top golfers. He's played here 5 times. He actually has made the cut all 5 times. Or excuse me, no, that's a complete lie. He's made the cut 3 of 5 times. That's misreading the 3 for a 5. In any case, yeah, he's missed the cut here 2 of his 5 times he's played here. He did finish T4 and T12 in 2015 and 2014, and then T22 in 2017. So when he's made the cut, he's actually played well here, but he has missed the cut here as well. And usually, because Spieth's driving of the golf ball is usually not the strength of his game, I can see why. Because Riviera is typically a tournament that promotes that, I can see why Spieth sometimes has struggled here in the past. But because the driving seems to be in line for Spieth, and the fact that I pointed out that the rough won't be as big of a deal here for this year just because of the conditions, that really doesn't bother me at all here for Jordan Spieth this week. So I would play Spieth. Go right on ahead. I have no issue with him as far as that goes. Moving on to Rory here. He's only played here 1 time. Back in 2016, he finished tied for 20th. That's perfectly fine. Rory did miss the cut last week. Kind of similar way his putter let him down. I believe he 5-putted one of the holes at Monterey Peninsula, which is pretty insane. But really, other than that, I mean, we don't have any strokes gained statistics yet to use for Rory. But just from a little bit of a checking the basic statistics and kind of, I hate the term eye test, but I'll just call it eye test, he seemed to be pretty much in line with most of his game except for the putter. And it showed like that in Europe. His game was phenomenal in Europe. So I would just chalk up, and I did point out for Rory, just for what it's worth, is that Rory at Pebble Beach, that was his first time playing in that tournament. He's played Pebble Beach before, the golf course, like at the U.S. Open, but that was the first time he played that tournament. And he 5-putted the hole at Monterey Peninsula, and I know there's some variance in that, but at the same time, I made the point that you're going to play 3 different golf courses, and maybe he hadn't played like Spyglass potentially, or hadn't played Monterey Peninsula before, and he had just gotten used to them. I don't know his exact history there, but I will just say that I'm sure his experience at those courses are it's much more on the minimal side in comparison to a lot of the other courses he's played. So it's not the biggest shocker to me that the putter let him down on some courses he's probably pretty unfamiliar with. So I think Rory can bounce back perfectly fine this week. I think he's perfectly fine to use. It's kind of in the same line as, with Jordan Spieth this week. So moving on from Rory, and we're going to take a look at Justin Thomas. Justin Thomas's form has been pretty solid. Nothing spectacular with Justin as of late, but he's been playing solidly. T17, T14, T22, 11th, 1st, and T17. Those are all his finishes for the 2017-18 season, if you go back to last fall. So his worst finish is T22 at the Century Tournament Champions in Kapalua. That is a limited field, so that was actually a much worse finish, really, than T22. But other than that, he's been pretty darn solid here. The putters let him down a little bit, not nearly to the same extent as Jordan Spieth, but the putter has been letting him down a little bit. He's 121st in strokes gained putting. His short game just around the green, 133rd. That's been a little bit weaker for Justin as well this year. That's usually a pretty high variance category as well in terms of the statistics. But tee to green, 38th, off the tee, 58th, and approaching the green, 25th. And so Justin, I think, is perfectly fine for this week, and probably I don't think his ownership's probably going to be that high. I kind of want to guess he'll probably have the lowest ownership of the 5 guys above 10K here on DraftKings. It's a little bit tough to guess. I think they're all going to be relatively similar, but if I had to guess, Justin will probably have the lowest if I had to make a bet on it. But not that I would, but if I had to. So that's where I would go with him. And then as for Paul Casey, I really like Paul Casey a lot. I think Paul Casey, and I'm just going to throw in Tommy Fleetwood here for a second just below him. I think both those guys are really good plays here for this week. They're both just outstanding iron players, and they're really good off the tee as well, but they are particularly good in strokes gained approaching the green. They are some of the most consistent guys that we've seen with them, particularly Paul Casey, who's just, he's had a longer career than Fleetwood, obviously, to this point. But, yeah, Paul Casey, definitely, I mean, if you take a look at his recent results, T8 at Pebble, T9 at Abu Dhabi, T11 at HSBC last fall, and then if you go farther back than that, T19 and T7 at some of the fall tournaments in the PGA portion of the season. Tommy Fleetwood obviously recently won over in Europe at Abu Dhabi, and then he followed that up with a T6 at Dubai as well. And then in the fall season, he was killing it as well with a T3 at Tigers tournament at the Hero World. 6th at Hong Kong, several other like top 10s, are in the European side of things in the fall. So they're both really good players, really good tee to green players. And I will just throw in, just because it's the strokes gained putting regression thing again, if we pull up Paul Casey here in his very limited PGA Tour sample so far, he is 204th in strokes gained putting. That's obviously going to regress positively as well. And so there are a lot of good candidates outside of Dustin Johnson here for strokes gained putting regression here below him. So just kind of adding all this up, it's like we all see that Dustin is the by far clear odds-on favorite here, and he should be. He's just absolutely killing it. But at the same time, I'm going to lose something there. Sorry about that. If we do take a look at this, Dustin does deserve to be the odds-on favorite. But it's not like all these other guys are stinking it up. It's really just the putters are letting him down, just giving him a little bit of a better shot. It's not like their tee to green games are awful. And so I would be surprised if we don't get one of these guys here at the top, maybe even a couple of them right there at the end of things. Probably with Dustin and a couple other random golfers we're not expecting. But I do think that's going to happen. So I really don't have an issue with any of the 5 guys. There's nobody I'm particularly negative on. I know that may not be super helpful, but I just want to kind of give you the lay of the land here for each one of the guys. And I think any combination you want to go really here in GPPs is perfectly fine. If you are going to go the cash format, on DraftKings at least, I would just grab DJ because he is the odds-on favorite by far, and he's not that much more expensive than the other guys, but also because DraftKings just continues to have these really cheap or really good players that are way too cheap. They have way too cheap of salaries, like down even near min salary. They're really good players. Like Bud Cauley, I saw was $6,700, I think, this week on DraftKings, which is absolutely preposterous. Here, let's just we can just scroll down here really quickly, and I'll show you before we wrap up here. Where are you? Let's see. I'm pretty sure I saw Cauley here somewhere. Let me do a little Control F function. There he is. Oh, Bud Cauley right here. Yeah, so he's a 1.13 odds per dollar here on DraftKings, and Bud Cauley at 6,700. Like, that's absurd, and you can tell by the odds diff right here at 2,200 between FanDuel and DraftKings. Like, that's just absurd. Like, Cauley should be at least mid 7K, probably upper 7K. And so you're gonna find a few of these guys up here. Brandon Harkin, 6,800 at a 1.23, and then Ryan Moore, 6,900, 1.3. Peter Uihlein, and then as we get up here, you're gonna have more 1.0 guys and everything. But if you just follow along here and use this odds per dollar sheet, you're just gonna see how the sportsbook odds in the betting markets, they just do not add up with DraftKings' salaries. And FanDuel's is a lot more accurate. FanDuel's isn't perfect either by any means, but FanDuel's is a lot better than DraftKings. And so for cash on DraftKings, you should just play Dustin. There's just no reason to really think about it, honestly, unless you're really attached to like a few guys in particular to make your salaries work, and you want to jump down to Jordan. I think that's perfectly fine too. But or you want to grab like Thomas and Casey, like that's fine too. Whatever you want. Honestly, any combination really isn't a problem. But unless you're really attached to somebody, I would just grab Dustin there in cash and go with the odds-on favorites from there. And so, anyways, that is pretty much it for this video. thank you for watching. As always, I'm at Nicky Skevich on Twitter. Daily Fantasy, I can't talk today. Daily Fantasy Winners is on Twitter at DFantasyWinners, and I'll put up some other guys that I like in the forum. I'll try and get to that a little bit earlier this week. I usually like to wait until sometime on Wednesday to do it, just so I can do some final report checks and everything like that, tee times, weather conditions, all that type of stuff. But so sometime Wednesday, I usually like to get those picks out. So, but anyways, I will have some of those guys that I do like or don't like on the forum. You can always check that out on DailyFantasyWinners.com, and appreciate all the subscriptions and likes to the YouTube channel and videos. All right, good luck, everybody.